You need to understand something before I tell you any of this. I'm not sitting in some safe place looking back on what happened. I'm still here. I'm in the tower right now. It's 11:47 at night, and I have 6 more hours until my shift ends, and I need to talk because talking is the only thing that keeps me from doing what it wants me to do. So if this sounds scattered, if I lose my train of thought, it's because I'm watching the tree line while I say this. I'm watching it, and I'm trying very hard not to walk down those stairs. My name is Cole Barrick. I'm 31. For the last 14 months, I've worked as a fire lookout for the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest in northern Idaho. Tower 9. It sits on a ridge called Harlan Spine at about 6,000 feet, are overlooking roughly 200,000 acres of timber to the south and east. The nearest staffed structure is a ranger cabin 19 miles down a service road that turns to mud every time it rains. The nearest town is Vape, population maybe 800, and it takes an hour and a half to reach it even in good weather. I took the job because I wanted to disappear for a while. That's the honest version. My mother had died 8 months before I applied. Pancreatic cancer. I was her primary caregiver for the last 14 weeks of her life, and when it was over, I found that I had no idea how to exist around other people anymore. Not because I was sad, though I was, because I had spent so long paying attention to the rhythms of someone else's body, her breathing, her sleep cycles, the specific pitch of her voice when the pain was worse than she admitted. That ordinary human interaction felt like noise. I couldn't hear what people meant anymore. Everything sounded like small talk, layered over suffering that nobody would name. So I applied for a seasonal lookout position, got hired because almost nobody wants these jobs anymore. Most of the detection work is done by cameras and satellites now, but the Forest Service still staffs a handful of towers in areas where the canopy is too dense for reliable satellite imaging, and Tower 9 is one of them. They told me during orientation that the previous lookout had left after one season and hadn't given a reason. I didn't think anything of it. People leave isolated postings all the time. It doesn't mean anything. It almost never means anything. The job itself is simple. I work a rotating schedule. 4 days on, 3 days off. During my 4 days, I stay in the tower around the clock. The cab is a 14 by 14 foot glass room with a cot, a propane stove, a radio, a fire finder, and enough canned food to last a week. I wake up at 6, do a full horizon scan, log weather conditions every 2 hours, watch for smoke, and radio in anything unusual. Most days I see nothing but trees and weather. Hawks. Sometimes elk in the meadow on the south slope. It is the quietest place I have ever been, and for the first 3 months it was exactly what I needed. I want to be careful about how I describe what changed, because I don't want to make it sound like a ghost story. It isn't one. I don't know what it is, but it started in my 4th month, around mid-September, and it didn't start with something I saw or heard. It started with something I felt. There's a specific kind of stillness that happens in deep forest when animals stop moving. Hikers call it a dead pocket. You'll be walking and suddenly realize you haven't heard a bird in 10 minutes. No insect noise, no wind in the canopy, nothing. It passes. It's usually a predator moving through, a cougar, a bear, and the prey animals go quiet until it's gone. I know this. I've felt it dozens of times. But what started happening in September was different because the dead pocket would form around the tower at exactly the same time every night. 9:14 p.m. I didn't notice the consistency at first. I just noticed that my evenings started to have a moment of absolute silence, deeper than the normal nighttime quiet. A silence that felt pressurized, like the air in the cab was being gently squeezed. I would be reading or logging data, and I would feel it arrive, and everything in me would stop. Not fear, not yet. Something closer to the feeling you get when someone walks into a room behind you and stands there without speaking. A shift in the weight of the space. I started marking it in my logbook. Not officially, just a small pencil dot next to the time entry. After 11 days, I looked at the dots, and they were all next to the same line. 9:14, every single night, 11 nights in a row. I told myself it was a temperature inversion pattern. Cold air settling into the valley at a predictable time, creating a sound shadow. It made sense. It was exactly the kind of explanation that would satisfy anyone who wasn't sitting in that glass box feeling it happen. But explanations are easy when the sun is up. At 9:14 on the 12th night, I put my book down and stood at the window and looked out into the dark, and that's when I saw the light. Not a flashlight, not a campfire. A pale, cool glow about 60 yards into the tree line on the north side, roughly the color of old bone. It was low to the ground, maybe 2 feet high, and it was perfectly still. It lasted about 40 seconds, then went out like a candle being pinched. No fade, just gone. I reported it the next morning as a possible illegal campsite. The ranger at the cabin, a woman named Dara Oakes, told me she would check it out when she made her rounds. She called me back that evening and said she had found nothing. No fire ring, no tracks, no trash. She asked if I was sleeping all right, and I said yes, and she said okay, and that was the end of it. The light came back the next night. Same time, same location, same color, same duration. 40 seconds, then gone. This continued for 6 nights. I stopped reporting it because there was nothing to report. A light in the woods that leaves no evidence is not a fire hazard. It's not my job to investigate it. My job is smoke detection. But I started doing something I'm not proud of, which is that I started changing small things about my routine to see if the light responded. On the 7th night, I turned off my lantern at 9:10, 4 minutes early. I sat in the dark cab and waited. At 9:14, the silence arrived, and the light appeared, same as always. But this time it was closer. Not 60 yards, maybe 40. I couldn't tell if it had moved or if it had simply appeared at a different position, but the result was the same. I had changed something, and the distance had changed in response. The next night I left my lantern on. The light appeared at 60 yards again. Original distance. The night after that I turned the lantern off at 9:12, 2 minutes early. The light appeared at 50 yards. I know how this sounds. I know it sounds like I was conducting an experiment, and I suppose I was, but it didn't feel clinical. It felt like a conversation. A very slow, very patient conversation, in which the only vocabulary was distance and light and timing. And there was something about it that I recognized, something that plucked at a string inside my chest that I thought had gone slack after my mother died. It was the feeling of being attended to, of having my patterns noticed, not watched, noticed. The way you notice someone you're learning to care about. I need to stop here and say that I understand this is where a rational person would have called for a transfer. I understand that now. But grief does something to your ability to evaluate risk. It doesn't make you reckless. It makes you hungry for the wrong things, and unable to identify them as wrong. I was hungry for reciprocity, for the sense that my existence was registering somewhere, in something, the way it had registered in my mother during those last weeks when I was the only person she recognized. The light in the trees was not my mother. I never thought it was. But it was something that knew when I was there and responded to what I did. And after 8 months of feeling like I was broadcasting into dead air, that was enough. On October 3rd, I did something I cannot defend. At 9:10, I turned off the lantern, walked down the tower stairs, and stood at the base. In the open. I waited 4 minutes. The silence came. The light appeared. Not in the tree line this time. It was at the edge of the clearing, 20 feet from the trees, maybe 80 feet from where I stood, and I could see it clearly for the first time. It wasn't a glow coming from the ground. It was a glow coming from something standing on the ground. The shape was wrong for a person. Too narrow. Too still. The proportions were elongated in a way that made my eyes slide off it. The way your vision rejects an optical illusion once you've seen the trick. But there was a shape inside the light, and the shape was facing me. I stood there for the full 40 seconds. When it disappeared, I climbed back up to the cab, and I was shaking so badly I couldn't hold my coffee mug. But I was not afraid. That's what I need you to understand. The shaking was not from fear. It was the kind of trembling you feel after something important happens, and your body doesn't know how to process the significance, like hearing news that changes your life. I was shaking because I understood that whatever was in those trees had just showed me more of itself, because I had come closer, and that meant we were in a negotiation. I've thought a lot about that word, negotiation, because it implies two parties who each want something the other has. I knew what I wanted, or I thought I did. I wanted to not be alone in the way I had been alone since my mother died, but I did not ask myself what it wanted. I did not ask myself why something in a forest would care about the schedule of a man in a tower. I did not ask myself why the silence preceded the light like a door being opened. The next 3 weeks are hard to talk about because they were the best 3 weeks I've had in years, and that fact is the most frightening part of this entire story. The pattern evolved, not on my schedule, on its own. The light began appearing earlier, 9:12, then 9:08, then 9. It was extending our time together, and the silence, the dead pocket, started arriving with a different quality. Not pressurized, warm, like the air in the cab was being held instead of squeezed. I started sleeping better than I had since before my mother's diagnosis. I started eating full meals. I started feeling for the first time in over a year like I was not just surviving but participating in something. During the day I was fine, normal. I did my job. I logged weather. I watched for smoke. I radioed in and sounded like any other lookout. But as the afternoon light changed and the shadows started reaching east across the canopy, I felt a pull in my sternum like a thread being drawn taut. Not painful, anticipatory, the way you feel driving home to someone you love. I stopped going down to the base. I didn't need to. The light was coming closer on its own. By late October, it was appearing at the edge of the clearing every night, and the glow was bright enough to cast faint shadows from the grass. I started talking to it, not out loud, not at first, in my head. Just a running narration of my day, the way I used to talk to my mother when she was past the point of responding, but I knew she could still hear me. I told it about the weather, about the hawk pair that nested in the dead ponderosa on the south slope, about the book I was reading, about my mother. And then one night in early November, I said something out loud. I don't remember what it was, something small, maybe just hi. And the light pulsed, once, bright, then dim, then back to its normal glow, like a heartbeat, like a reply. I said something else. It pulsed again. I talked for the full duration that night. Every sentence got a pulse, and I cried, and I'm not going to apologize for that because you don't understand what it's like to talk and be answered after that long in the quiet. November 7th is when it changed. I was on my 3 days off. I was in Vaipe, in the small rental I keep for my off-rotation days. It was evening. I was cooking dinner. And at 9:14 the kitchen went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The refrigerator hum stopped. The heating vent stopped. The ambient noise of the town, cars, dogs, wind, all of it dropped away like a cloth falling over a cage. And I felt it. The warmth, the held air, the thread in my sternum pulling taut. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out into the backyard, and there was nothing there. Just the dark yard and the fence and the alley beyond it. But the silence lasted 40 seconds. Exactly 40 seconds. And when it ended, everything resumed as if it had never stopped. I drove back to the tower the next morning, a day early. I didn't radio in to explain. I just drove. And that night at 9:14, the light was at the base of the tower, not at the tree line, not at the edge of the clearing, at the base, right where I had stood on October 3rd. And it was brighter than I had ever seen it, and the shape inside it was looking up at me, and I felt, I cannot find another word for this, I felt welcomed. That was 5 weeks ago. I need to tell you what has happened since, and I need to say it clearly because this is the part where I stopped being a willing participant and became something else. The silence started lasting longer. 40 seconds became 2 minutes, then 5, then 20. The dead pocket that used to arrive and leave began arriving and staying. I would notice it at 9 and it would not lift until past midnight. 3 hours of perfect, warm, held silence. And during those hours the pull in my chest was constant, and it was not pulling me toward the window to look at the light. It was pulling me toward the stairs. It wanted me to come down. I started finding reasons to go down. I need to check the rain gauge. I need to clear the steps. I need to stretch my legs. Every reason was legitimate. Every reason put me on the ground at the base of the tower in the dark. And every time I was down there, the tree line felt closer. Not because the trees had moved, because the clearing felt smaller. As if the space between the forest and the tower was a distance that existed only because I still believed in it. 3 weeks ago, I radioed Dara at the ranger cabin and told her I was having trouble with my sleep schedule. I asked if there was anything unusual about the north tree line, any geological surveys, any mineral deposits that might produce bioluminescence, any history of unusual activity. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that I have replayed in my mind every day since. She said, "Cole, the last 3 lookouts in Tower 9 all asked me that same question, and they all asked it around the same point in the season." I asked her what happened to them. She said they all finished their contracts and declined to return. She said one of them, a man named Paul Rusk, had called her from his home in Bozeman 6 months after his season ended and asked her if anything had changed at the tower. She said he sounded like he missed it. She told me to call her if I needed anything and signed off. I need to tell you what happened 4 nights ago, because it is the reason I am talking right now instead of walking down those stairs. It was 9:14. The silence was already in place. The light was at the base of the tower. I was standing at the window looking down at it, and the pull was so strong I had my hand on the door handle, and the light moved. For the first time in all these months, it moved while I was watching. It drifted from the base of the tower toward the north tree line. Slowly. The speed of a person walking. And it stopped at the edge of the trees, and the shape inside it turned back toward me. And I understood with absolute clarity that it was showing me the way. That all of this, the schedule, the silence, the warmth, the reciprocity, had been a path, and the path led into the trees, and I was supposed to follow. My hand was turning the door handle. I was not deciding to turn it. My hand was doing it the way your hand pulls back from a hot stove. Automatically. The pull in my chest was not a thread anymore. It was a current, and my whole body was in the water. I let go of the handle because my radio crackled, just static. A brief pop of noise from the speaker on the desk. But it was enough to break the circuit for 1 second, and in that second I understood something that I had not allowed myself to understand. I was not being invited. I was being collected. The warmth in the silence was not affection. It was appetite. The pulsing in response to my voice was not conversation. It was calibration. Every night for months, something in that forest had been learning the exact shape and weight of my loneliness, and it had been giving me back a perfect mirror of what I needed, and the mirror was a mouth. I stepped back from the door. The pull didn't stop. It hasn't stopped. But I didn't go down. The next night I tried something. At 9:14, when the silence came, I turned on every light in the cab. I turned on the radio and tuned it to static. I filled the space with noise and light, and I sat in the middle of it, and I did not look out the window. The silence pressed against the glass. I could feel it like water pressure against a diving mask. But I didn't look. At 9:56, the silence broke. Not gradually. It snapped. Like a door slamming. And from the tree line on the north side, something screamed. I have heard elk bugle. I have heard cougars scream. I have heard the sound a tree makes when it falls in winter, and the frozen wood shrieks as it splits. This was none of those things. This was a sound that had frequency and tone, but no source that could be biological. It was high, and it was sustained, and it lasted for 11 seconds by my watch, and it communicated one thing so clearly that I felt it in my teeth. Anger. It was angry because I hadn't come down. It was angry the way a patient thing becomes angry when its patience stops working. And the anger told me more about what it was than all those months of warm silence ever had. Because the warmth had been a tool, and the anger was real. Last night was worse. The silence came at 8:45, half an hour early. The light appeared at 7:50, before dark. While there was still gray light in the sky, I could see the tree line clearly, and the glow was there, low to the ground, and the shape inside it was not standing anymore. It was pressed against the ground, long, narrow, extended toward the tower like a finger pointing, like something flattening itself to fit under a door. The pull in my chest was so strong I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood just to give my body a different signal to process. I sat on the floor of the cab with my back against the cot, and I did not look out the window for 4 hours. The silence did not break. The scream did not come. But at 1 a.m, I heard a sound I cannot explain, and I will not try to explain it because I don't think it's possible to make someone understand it with words. It was the sound of my mother's breathing, the specific, labored, rattling pattern from her last night, coming from the base of the tower. I did not go down. I covered my ears and I talked out loud. I recited weather data. I recited every state capital. I recited the Lord's Prayer, which I have not said since I was 11. I talked until my voice was raw and the sound stopped. That was last night. It is now 11:53 p.m. on the night after. The silence arrived at 8:30, 15 minutes earlier than yesterday. The light is at the base of the tower. I have not looked at it directly, but I can see the glow reflected on the ceiling of the cab. The pull is in my chest, and it is in my legs, and it is in my hands. My body wants to go down those stairs with a conviction that feels more like memory than desire, as if I have already gone down and my body is simply trying to catch up to what has already happened. I am not going down. I have 19 days left on my contract. Dara checks in by radio every morning at 7. If I miss a check-in, she will drive up, and the drive takes 3 hours. That's a long time. A lot can happen in the dark in 3 hours. I don't know what's in those trees. I don't know if it was here before the tower was built, or if the tower is the reason it's here. I don't know if Paul Rusk in Bozeman still feels the pull, or if it fades when you leave. I don't know if it fades. I know that it learned me, not watched me, learned me. It learned the specific geometry of what I was missing, and it built itself into that shape, and it held that shape for months with a patience that is not human, because nothing human is that patient. And when the shape stopped working, it reached for something deeper, and it found my mother's breathing, and it used it. And that is the thing I will not forgive. The glow on the ceiling is brighter now. The silence is so total that I can hear my own heartbeat in my ears and the scratch of nothing against the glass. My hand is resting on my knee and my fingers are twitching toward the door, and I'm watching them move the way you watch someone else's hand. And I am telling you this because I need my voice in my own ears louder than the quiet. If you ever take a lookout posting in northern Idaho, in the Nez Perce Clearwater, and they offer you Tower 9 on Harlan's Spine, I need you to understand something. The silence at 9:14 is not weather. The light in the north tree line is not geological. And the warmth you feel when it arrives is not yours. It is a perfect, careful, patient replica of the thing you need most, and it is not offering it to you. It is wearing it, and it knows exactly when you'll be alone. Remember, some places don't want you to leave. Thanks for watching the video.